So in this video, I'm going to give you a lesson plan for teaching pathos appeals. So that's appeals to an audience's emotions and values as a component of rhetoric. So basically, when I teach this, I start by having my students do an opening free write where they explain or define pathos. This is very similar to how I open both my lessons on logos and my lessons on ethos. So we start with that. I have the students write out what they think pathos means, and then have a few of them read what they've written aloud. Then on the board, I will put the two major categories of pathos. So that's, again, emotions and values. And we'll make lists of them. So, I mostly have students do the work of this. So the first list is, what emotions might you appeal to, or might you try and get readers, listeners, viewers, whatever it is, to experience in order to persuade them of something? And then we talk briefly about the benefits and the drawbacks of appeals to emotions. Because some of the benefits are that people tend to be very viscerally affected by emotional appeals, especially strong emotions like outrage or compassion or empathy. If we can get audiences to feel these, we can often get them to go along with whatever it is that we want them to think or believe. Some of the pitfalls are that audiences might not experience the emotions we want them to experience, especially if our appeal is poorly constructed or we've missed the mark on how an audience is going to react to a particular technique. The other big problem, I think, with appeals to emotions is that once that emotional high wears off, people are less likely to continue to be persuaded. They're more likely to sort of step back and say, yeah, I felt very patriotic or very scared or very part of that group at the time. But now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know that the argument was that persuasive. I don't know that it was that logical. So emotional appeals can have a short shelf life. So that's the first stage. Then in the second stage in defining pathos is to talk about the values, the things that an audience might hold dear, the things that might be important to them, and that writers, authors, speakers can appeal to. So values like compassion, sustainability, tradition, religious values, etc., etc. These are very powerful things to appeal to. And I emphasize this to students, that values are very powerful things to appeal to because people tend to hold them deeply. So whereas emotion may be fairly temporary and then your emotions may shift, values tend to be more stable, more perhaps permanent. And so if you can convince someone that the thing you're trying to get them to do aligns with their values, they're more likely to accept it and to be on your side. So then we look at some commercials, because commercials tend to have strong pathos appeals. And I use three distinct commercials. I use a Pennsylvania Lottery commercial where Gus, who's the Pennsylvania Lottery groundhog, goes to a hibachi restaurant. I use a CDC commercial about quitting smoking with a guy who has COPD, and I use an Australian recycling ad by Coca-Cola. But you can choose any ones that you want. Almost all commercials have pathos appeals, some of them stronger than others. And so what I do is a three-step. Well, the students go through a three-step process, basically. So the first thing we do is we watch each commercial individually, and afterwards I have them do two things. One is They identify, and I have them do this individually, by the way. So the first two steps that they go through are working alone. So the first is that they identify as specifically as they can the intended audience of this commercial. So who is this commercial targeting? Who is it trying to persuade? Second, they write down as many emotions as they think that this commercial is trying to get its intended audience to feel. So what is it trying to get audiences to experience? Pride, fear, sympathy, patriotism, anger, whatever it is. Then we watch the commercials a second time. And after each one, I give them a few minutes to talk with the people around them about what values this ad anticipates the audience having and how we know that. What in the commercial points us to that value. Then we talk about all of them. We go through, after they've talked through the sets of values, we go through and I ask, for each of the three commercials, I ask the three questions. Who's the intended audience for this commercial and how do we know? What emotions does this ad attempt to evoke and how do we know? And what values does this ad count on? What values does it appeal to? And how do we know? How do we see those appeals to values reflected in the commercial itself? And then finally, I ask them, which of these three ads has the most effective pathos appeals and why? And that discussion, again, the first part of the discussion is analysis. This is what's going on here. What is this ad doing? What are the component parts of this ad doing? And the second part is evaluation. Which is the most effective and why? Which is the most persuasive and why? So we're comparing and contrasting them to determine the most successful ad. So for me, I teach this, again, as part of a rhetorical evaluation project where students are required to both analyze and evaluate the persuasive, the effectiveness of the persuasive techniques for the text's intended audience. So that analysis and evaluation component is very, very important for when I teach them.